10 minutes. That's how long Viper Team had left to live. Pinned down in the freezing mud of the Petch Valley out of ammo and abandoned by command. They were ready to die together. But just as the enemy closed in, a voice crackled over the dead frequency, a voice belonging to a pilot who wasn't supposed to exist. The silence of the Hindu Kush is a liar. It tells you that you are alone, that the snow-capped peaks scraping the grey sky are just scenery, not walls of a cage. But Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance knew better. The silence was just the breath the mountain took before it screamed. Sarah callsign Valkyrie adjusted the strap of her Mk-18 rifle. The cold was a physical weight pressing through her thermal layers, biting at the exposed skin of her face. She was the first woman to officially wear the trident in a Tier 1 operator capacity, a classified experiment that the Pentagon was terrified would fail. But she hadn't failed. She had thrived. Until tonight. "Check in," she whispered into her comms. "Viper too good," came the gravelly voice of Chief Miller, her second in command. Miller was a block of granite from Texas, a man who had survived Fallujah and Ramadi. "Viper 3 good. Freezing my nads off, but good," whispered Jax, the team's medic and sniper. "Viper 4 secure," said Davis, the heavy weapons specialist. They were perched on a ridge overlooking a narrow goat trail in the Kunar province. Intel had promised a high-value target, a financier for the insurgency named Hakim. It was supposed to be a simple snatch and grab. In and out before the moon rose. But the intel was wrong. It wasn't a meeting point. It was a kill box. "Movement," Jax hissed. 3 o'clock, ridgeline. Sarah shifted her optics. Through the green phosphorus glow of her night vision, she saw them. Not 5 men. Not 10. Dozens. Heat signatures were blooming all over the opposing slope like a rash. "It's a setup," Sarah realized, her stomach dropping. "They knew we were coming. Pull back. Rally point Alpha." But before the order could fully leave her lips, the silence broke. An RPG hissed through the air, leaving a trail of smoke before slamming into the rock face 10 feet above Davis. The explosion was deafening, a concussive slap that rattled their teeth. "Contact, contact, front!" Miller roared, opening up with his saw gun. The night erupted. Tracers green and red stitched the air between the two ridges. The sound was a continuous, tearing roar. Sarah dove behind a slab of granite debris, raining down on her helmet. "Sit rep!" she screamed over the gunfire. "Davis is hit," Jax yelled. "Shrapnel to the leg. He's mobile but slow." "We need to move now." Sarah returned fire, dropping 2 shadows rushing their flank. "Overlord, this is Viper 1-1. We are in a tick troops in contact, taking heavy fire. Requesting immediate QRF quick reaction force and CAS close air support." The radio crackled with static, the terrain interfering with the signal. Then the calm, detached voice of the Tosi Tactical Operations Center, back at Bagram Airfield, came through. "Viper 1-1, this is Overlord. Copy TIC. Stand by." "Stand by. We don't have time to stand by." Sarah fired another burst. The enemy was maneuvering, closing the pincer. They were being herded against a sheer drop-off. "We have at least 50 fighters' heavy weapons. We need a spectral gunship on station yesterday. Viper 1-1, be advised. Weather at the pass has degraded. Heavy snowfall and 0 visibility. Air assets are grounded. QRF is 2 hours out by ground." Sarah froze. 2 hours. They didn't have 2 minutes. The enemy fire was intensifying. An RPK machine gun was chewing up the rock, protecting Miller. "Overlord, you don't understand," Sarah shouted, her voice losing its tactical calm. "If we don't get air support, we are coming home in bags. Do you copy? We copy Viper 1-1, but we cannot risk airframes in 0 vis. You are on your own. Break contact and evade. Overlord out." The line went dead. Sarah looked at her team. Miller was reloading, his face grim. Jax was dragging Davis, whose leg was a bloody mess. They looked at her. They heard the radio call. They knew what it meant. The Pentagon didn't want a headline saying, "The first female SEAL led her team to a massacre." It was cleaner if they disappeared into the fog of war. It was a calculation, a cold mathematical deduction made by men in air-conditioned rooms. "They aren't coming," Miller said, spitting blood from a cut on his lip. "No," Sarah said, checking her magazine. She had 2 left. "They aren't." The enemy was closing in. She could hear their shouts, now the distinct call to prayer, mixed with the orders to kill. They were surrounded, outgunned, and abandoned. "Fix bayonets if you got 'em," Miller muttered a dark joke. Sarah looked up at the sky. It was a thick, swirling soup of grey clouds and snow. No helicopter could fly in this. No drone could see through it. They were ghosts already. "We make them pay for every inch," Sarah commanded, her voice steadying. "Viper team does not die on its knees." But as she raised her rifle for the final stand, a sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't the chugging of a helicopter or the buzz of a drone. It was a high-pitched whine, distant at first, then growing to a scream. It was the sound of a jet engine pushing past the red line. Sarah tapped her headset. "Overlord, are you inbound?" "Negative, Viper. Airspace is clear." "Then who is that?" Sarah whispered. The sound grew louder, a banshee wail echoing off the canyon walls. It shouldn't be possible. No pilot could navigate the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush in this weather at this speed. It was suicide. And then a voice broke onto their encrypted channel. It wasn't standard military protocol. It wasn't a call sign she recognized. It was a voice that sounded like it had been gargling whiskey and razor blades. "Viper 1-1, this is Ghost Rider. I hear you're looking for a ride home. Keep your heads down, darling. I'm about to mow the lawn." The radio transmission hung in the air, surreal against the backdrop of explosions. "Darling, no military pilot spoke like that." "Who is this?" Sarah demanded. "Identify yourself." "Just a friend from the dark, Valkyrie," the voice drawled. "Identify friendly positions with IR strobes." "Now." Sarah didn't hesitate. Protocol was dead. "Pop strobes," she yelled. Miller and Jax activated the infrared strobes on their helmets and thrown markers. To the naked eye, nothing changed, but to anyone with the right sensors, Viper Team became a constellation of flashing lights in the abyss. "Strobes are active," Sarah yelled. The screaming engine noise was right on top of them now. Suddenly the clouds directly above the enemy ridge tore open. A dark shape, sleek and terrifyingly fast, plunged out of the overcast sky. It wasn't an F-18 or an F-16. It was older, distinctive. "Is that a—" Miller squinted. "It's a Phantom," Sarah breathed. "An F-4 Phantom." It was a relic, a Vietnam-era jet that had been retired from US service decades ago. But here it was, painted matte black, screaming down the valley like a vengeful god. The ridgeline where the Taliban fighters were massing erupted. The Phantom didn't just drop a bomb, it strafed. The nose of the jet sparked as the 20mm Vulcan cannon unleashed a torrent of lead. It sounded like a giant tearing a sheet of canvas. Brrrr-t. The earth exploded. Rock, snow, and enemy fighters were vaporized in a line of fire that passed less than 50 meters from Sarah's position. The jet pulled up hard, banking vertically, its afterburners glowing like demon eyes in the mist. The sheer G-force of the maneuver should have ripped the wings off a 40-year-old airframe. Holy mother of... Jax stared, forgetting to fire. "How's that for a weather report?" the pilot asked, his voice calm despite the violent maneuvering. "I've got enough juice for 2 more passes. You need to move to the valley floor. There's a flat patch near the riverbed. I can buy you 5 minutes." "Copy that, Ghost Rider," Sarah said, adrenaline flooding her system. Moving now. Miller get Davis. Go. The team scrambled down the scree slope, sliding and stumbling. Behind them, the enemy was in disarray, shocked by the sudden air power from a sky that was supposed to be empty. But they were recovering quickly. Mortar rounds began to walk down the slope after the SEALs. They're ranging us, Miller shouted, hoisting Davis onto his shoulder. I see 'em, the ghost pilot said, turning and burning. The Phantom returned. This time it came from the valley floor, flying up towards the enemy positions. It was insane. The pilot was flying below the ridgeline, navigating a narrow canyon in a blizzard at 500 knots. Sarah watched as the jet released unguided rockets from under its wings. They slammed into the mortar pits with pinpoint precision. The pilot wasn't using computer targeting. He was aiming with his eyes flying by instinct and raw nerve. "Who is this guy?" Miller panted as they reached the riverbed. "That's not Navy. That's not Air Force." "I don't know," Sarah said, scanning the LZ. "But he's saving our lives." They reached the flat patch of gravel. It was defensible, but they were still exposed. "Viper 1-1, listen to me closely." The voice came back, sounding strained now. "I've got 2 bogies on my tail. Looks like your friends brought man-pads, man-portable air defense systems." Sarah's heart stopped. Heat-seeking missiles. The Phantom had no modern countermeasures. "Ghost Rider evade, get out of there." "Negative. If I leave, they swarm you before the extraction bird gets here. I'm going to draw their fire." "No. That's suicide," Sarah screamed. "It's what I do, kid. By the way, tell Stone I said he still owes me that drink." Stone. Commander Stone was the head of JSOC Joint Special Operations Command, the man who signed Sarah's orders. How did this rogue pilot know the most powerful man in Special Ops? Above them, the drama played out. 2 trails of smoke, the missiles shot up from the mountainside, locking onto the heat of the Phantom's engines. The pilot didn't climb. He dove. He threw the heavy jet into a spin, dropping flares that looked pathetic against the incoming missiles. Boom! An explosion lit up the clouds. A fireball. "Ghost Rider," Sarah screamed. Silence. Then a cough over the radio. "Missed me. Barely. Took some shrapnel in the rudder. She's flying heavy. But I'm still here." The relief nearly brought Sarah to her knees. "You crazy son of a bitch." "Save the sweet talk. I see lights. 3 clicks south. Looks like a private extraction bird. You might want to wave hello." Sarah looked south. Through the snow she saw the strobe of a helicopter. It wasn't a standard Black Hawk. It was a Sikorsky S-92, painted dark grey with no markings, a contractor bird. "That's not QRF," Miller said. "That's private military." "I don't care if it's the ice cream truck," Sarah said. Pop smoke. As the helicopter descended, kicking up a blinding storm of snow and dust, the Phantom circled one last time, overhead a dark guardian angel watching over them. The side door of the helicopter slid open. A man in nondescript tactical gear waved them in. They threw Davis inside and scrambled aboard. As Sarah pulled herself up, she looked back at the sky. "Ghost Rider, we are secure. RTB, return to base. Come home." There was a long pause. "Negative, Viper. I'm running on fumes and I'm leaking hydraulic fluid. I'm not making it back to the barn." "Then eject Punch-Out!" Sarah yelled into her headset as the helicopter lifted off. "Can't. If I punch out here, they'll find the wreckage. They'll find the black box. They'll know who I am. And that would cause a hell of a diplomatic incident for your boss. This bird doesn't exist. And neither do I." Sarah gripped the doorframe, the wind tearing at her eyes. "Don't do this. You're safe, Sarah. That's the job. Keep fighting the good fight. Ghost Rider signing off." The radio went to static. Sarah watched the black shape of the phantom climb vertically into the storm, disappearing into the clouds. Seconds later, a bright flash illuminated the peaks miles away. No sound followed immediately, just the silent confirmation of a sacrifice. He had flown it into the mountain. The flight back to the safe house in Jalalabad was silent. The adrenaline had crashed, leaving behind a hollow ache. Davis was stabilized, doped up on morphine. Miller stared at the floor. Sarah sat near the door, staring at the radio handset, willing it to speak. They landed at a private airfield, run by Aegis Defense Services, a shadowy PMC private military company that handled jobs the government couldn't officially touch. When the rotors stopped, a black SUV pulled up. The back door opened, and Commander Stone stepped out. He was a man of sharp lines and sharper eyes, wearing a suit that looked out of place in the dust. Sarah stormed off the chopper, ignoring protocol. She walked straight up to the commander of JSOC. "Who was he?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage and exhaustion. Stone didn't flinch. He looked at her, then at the team. "Good to see you alive, Lieutenant Commander." "Don't give me that," Sarah snapped. "Overlord left us to die. Someone else came. Someone flying a 40-year-old phantom. He knew you, Stone. He told me to tell you that you owe him a drink." Stone's mask of indifference cracked. For a second, he looked old. Tired. He sighed and gestured to the car. "Get in. Just you." Sarah signaled Miller to stand down and got into the armored SUV. The interior was quiet, soundproofed. The pilot swore. Stone began pouring a glass of water from a decanter. Was not American military. Not anymore. He called himself Ghost Rider, Sarah said. Stone gave a dry, sad chuckle. Of course he did. His name was Colonel Jack Razor Reynolds. Sarah frowned. The name triggered a memory from her time at the academy. The ace, the one who was court-martialed in OR5. The same Stone said. Jack was the best stick I ever saw, but he had a problem with authority. In 2005, he disobeyed a direct order to abort a bombing run in Iraq to save a pinned-down Marine platoon. He saved the Marines, but he destroyed a politically sensitive mosque in the process. The press ate him alive. The Navy stripped his wings and kicked him out. So how was he flying a jet in Afghanistan tonight? Because I asked him to, Stone said softly. When Overlord told me the weather was 0-0 and they were scrubbing the QRF, I knew I couldn't let my best team die. But I couldn't order a military asset to fly. The risk was too high. If an F-18 crashed, the administration would fall. Stone looked out the window. So I made a call to a private contractor, a group of old war horses who maintain decommissioned aircraft for training purposes. Jack was working there as a mechanic. He wasn't supposed to fly. He was just supposed to fuel the drone. He stole the Phantom, Sarah realized. He borrowed it, Stone corrected. He knew the Phantom could handle the G-load better than the modern fly-by-wire jets in that turbulence. It's analog, mechanical, like him. He knew it was a one-way trip. He didn't have the fuel to get back, and he knew the electronics were shot. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. He did it for us. He didn't even know us. He knew you, Stone said, turning to look at her. He followed your career, Sarah. He was the one who recommended you for the SEAL program initially. He wrote the dissenting opinion that got you into buds when everyone else said no. Sarah was stunned. She had never known who her benefactor was. She thought she had fought her way in alone. Why? Because Jack believed that warriors aren't defined by gender or protocol, Stone said. They are defined by the willingness to fly into the storm when everyone else is grounded. He saw that in you. Tonight, he just wanted to make sure the fire didn't go out. Sarah looked down at her hands, still grime-stained from the mountain. "He told me to tell you he's still waiting for that drink." Stone nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "I know. I'll have to pay that tab in the next life." The car stopped. They were at the medical bay, Sarah, Stone said as she opened the door. "This conversation never happened. Colonel Reynolds died in a car accident in Virginia 10 years ago. That phantom doesn't exist. Tonight was just a weather anomaly." "Yes, sir," Sarah said, her voice hard. "A weather anomaly. 6 months is a lifetime in the teams. It is enough time for bones to knit, for skin to graft, and for the nightmares of the Hindu Kush to retreat from a scream to a dull, throbbing ache. But for Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance, 6 months had been a lesson in the weight of silence. It was late October in Virginia. Arlington National Cemetery was a sea of manicured green and white rolling hills of precise geometry that stood in stark contrast to the chaotic, jagged peaks where they had almost died. The autumn wind stripped the maples of their leaves, sending showers of red and gold drifting over the endless rows of headstones. It was peaceful, quiet, and orderly. Everything war was not. Sarah walked the path alone, at first her boots crunching softly on the gravel. She wasn't wearing her dress blues. Today wasn't about the Navy. It wasn't about the institution that had abandoned them on that ridge. She wore a heavy leather jacket, jeans and sunglasses to hide eyes that hadn't slept properly since the valley. She found the section she was looking for, section 60, but a quiet corner of it, away from the fresh blooms and the grieving families of the recently fallen. This was the place for the quiet ones, the complicated ones. She stopped in front of a modest white marble headstone. Jack Reynolds, 1965, 2015. Beloved father and husband. The inscription was a lie, a government-sanctioned fabrication. According to the official report Sarah had read, the one she had been forced to sign an NDA regarding Colonel Reynolds had died in a single-vehicle collision on a wet highway in Roanoke. Drunk driving. A tragic, ignoble end for a washed-up mechanic. "They didn't give you your stars back, did they, Jack?" she whispered, her voice catching in the crisp air. "They didn't tell the world you saved Viper Team when the whole damn Pentagon turned its back." The injustice of it burned in her chest, hotter than the shrapnel that had grazed her ribs. The world thought he was a cautionary tale. Sarah knew he was a savior. She heard the footsteps before she saw them. She didn't turn. She knew the cadence. Heavy, rhythmic, familiar. "You didn't wait for us, boss," Chief Miller's voice rumbled. Sarah turned. They were all there. Miller looking like a block of granite in a flannel shirt. Jack's hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the perimeter out of habit. And Davis. Davis was leaning heavily on a cane, his leg rebuilt with titanium and stubbornness, but he was standing upright. "You're walking well, Davis," Sarah noted softly. "Beats being carried," Davis replied, a grim smile touching his lips. He looked at the grave, his expression sobering. "Is this him?" "This is the stone," Sarah said. "The man is somewhere else. Up there, maybe." She gestured vaguely to the grey, overcast sky. Miller stepped forward, pulling a bottle from his jacket. It wasn't the expensive single malt they usually drank to toast fallen brothers. It was Old Crow. Cheap, harsh, industrial-strength whiskey. The kind a mechanic would keep in a toolbox. The kind a man drinks when he has demons to drown. "Commander Stone told me this was his brand," Miller said, unscrewing the cap. He poured a generous measure onto the grass at the base of the stone. The liquid soaked into the earth instantly. "To the Ghost Rider." "To the Ghost Rider," the team echoed in unison. Sarah reached into the inner pocket of her jacket. Her fingers brushed against rough, charred fabric. For months she had carried it like a talisman. It was a Velcro patch recovered from the crash site by a cleanup crew Stone had sent in before the CIA sanitized the valley. It smelled of jet fuel ozone and ancient tragedy. She knelt in the grass. The damp cold seeped into her jeans, grounding her. With her bare hands, she dug a small, shallow hole in the earth, right above where Jack's heart would have been. She placed the patch inside. A skeleton riding a lightning bolt. "You bought us time, Jack," she said, her voice steady now. "You spent your life so we could keep ours. I don't know the exchange rate on a soul, but I promise you we won't waste the coin." She covered the patch with dirt, patting it down firmly. It was done. The debt wasn't paid. It could never be paid, but it was acknowledged. Davis shifted his weight on his cane. "So what now? LT Stone sent the packet over this morning. They want Viper back on the board. Direct action. Somalia." Jax looked at her, his eyebrows raised. "We could retire, you know. Write books. Consult on movies. We survived the impossible. No one would blame us if we walked away." Sarah stood up, brushing the dirt from her hands. She looked at her team. They were battered. They were scarred. They carried the ghosts of the things they had done and the things they had seen. But they were alive. "Jack didn't punch out," Sarah said, her eyes hard and clear. "He rode a burning phantom into a mountainside because the job wasn't done. If we quit now, his sacrifice means nothing. If we quit, the bad guys win." She looked at Davis. "Can you run?" Davis straightened his spine, ignoring the pain in his leg. "I can keep up, boss." "Miller." "Locked and loaded." Sarah turned back to the grave one last time. She snapped a sharp, perfect salute, not to the drunk driver the world remembered, but to the ace pilot who ruled the storm. "Viper team," she commanded, the steel returning to her voice. "Move out." They turned in unison, walking away from the rows of the dead and back toward the world of the living. As they reached the edge of the cemetery, a sound tore through the silence above them. It was a commercial airliner climbing out of Reagan National Banking, hard against the wind. But the angle of the sun caught the condensation trail, and for a fleeting, heart-stopping second, it didn't look like a 737. It looked like a dark, swept-wing shadow, a predator, a guardian. Sarah watched it disappear into the clouds, a small smile playing on her lips. "Keep the engine running, Ghost Rider," she whispered to the wind. "We'll be seeing you." The mission continued, but now they knew they weren't just fighting for their country. They were fighting for the ghost who flew them home. That is the untold story of the ghost of the Hindu Kush. Sometimes, heroism isn't about following orders. It's about breaking the rules to do what's right. If this story moved, you hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss a tale of valor from the shadows. Who do you think the ghost pilot really was? Let me know in the comments below.